Hello and welcome to another episode of MO2VATE Mix interviews brought to you by MO2VATE Magazine, which is a global online business publication which covers 6 different areas from business, inspiration, health, and so much more. If you're new here today, welcome. And for our return viewers, welcome back. I'm Kadeen Sterling, known as the Divorce and Separation Coach and mentor to women, and I'll be representing MO2VATE Magazine today. So it's good to have you all here. I'm joined by the lovely Suzy Hunt. Suzy is a deep personality profiler, founder and coach at Future You Business Coaching, leadership mentor, podcaster, and so much more. The list goes on. Suzy, welcome. Welcome. It's so lovely to have you here.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm up here in rainy Manchester. Just getting used to the changing weather, but I'm good, thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic. So the reason we're here today is the article that you wrote for MO2VATE Magazine, and it's titled "How to Thrive in a Remote Selling Environment." Yeah, is that correct?
Yes.
Brilliant. So before we get into that, I would love for our viewers just to hear a little bit more about you and some of your accomplishments, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I'm, as you introed me perfectly there, I'm Suzy. I'm a sales and business coach. I'm based in a little town called Knutsford in Cheshire, which is just south of Manchester. I'm an experienced sales leader. So I've had about 14 years experience working in the UK soft drinks market for brands such as Lucozade and Ribena. I started there as a grad and I worked my way up to become the head of field sales for their out of home channel. And I had a very fortunate opportunity when I was working there, where I managed a large team, and I loved managing people and getting the best out of people in that kind of work environment. And one day I was on a training course and somebody, the person who was facilitating that course came over to me in a break and said, wow, like you're really passionate, aren't you, about like people development and getting the best out of others? I can just tell. And I was like, oh, no one's ever said that to me before. But yes, I am. I absolutely love helping people and helping them thrive at work. And they said to me, have you ever thought about training to become a coach? And I said, no, I haven't at all. And that really kind of sparked a bit of a light bulb for me. And I went off and had a bit of a think about it and did some research. And essentially, I decided to take myself back to university and train to become an accredited business coach. And I did that. So I was working full time. I was pregnant with my first child, and I was also studying at uni for my coaching qualification. So now I think back and I'm like, oh my goodness me, what on earth was I doing? Like, hindsight is an absolutely brilliant thing. And yeah, I got the opportunity at the back end of last year to have a think about what I did next with my career. And I decided to combine my brand new shiny coaching qualification with my 14 years experience in industry and in sales, and set myself up as a sales and business coach. And like you said, I also do personality profiling, leadership mentoring, and I host a podcast called The Coaching Cast with somebody else as well. And yeah, I just provide kind of hands-on sales experience coaching to individuals and organizations who might be struggling with their sales. So how to regenerate their sales approach, or how to direct their sales team to achieve their targets. So I really kind of work in that sales space for slightly smaller organizations and individuals. And yeah, I help people find new ways really to approach and solve those business challenges that we all have and we all face when we own our own business. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me and my story,
In
really.
a nutshell. Well, if I could just bring it back, because I read that you said, you're a problem solving partner to small business owners and leaders, and you've touched on that a little bit. But just out of curiosity, because maybe a lot of us won't know this, where you said, you're a profiler. Tell us a little bit more about that. How does that work in a business context?
Yeah, so it's something that, again, I came across when I was leading a big team. When you manage people, people are people. Every single one of us is different, and every single one of us has different traits to our personality, preferences in terms of the way we work and communicate and problem solve. And that really fascinated me about how I got the best out of the people that I was working with, and also is really insightful knowledge about how you then lead and manage people more effectively, and kind of overcome things like conflict in teams and looking at strengths of teams. So how it essentially works is I facilitate a process where each individual fills out a personality profiling kind of questionnaire. So the one I use is called DISC. There's lots of other ones on the marketplace, such as Color Insights is a really popular one. And we kind of then delve into that once the report comes back. So I can delve into that for a particular individual if they're wanting to know more about what might be holding them back in the workplace, how they might want to modify their management style to get the best out of those who are in their team or that they're working with. And also you can overlay that insight into building really high performing, extremely effective teams as well. So looking at what the makeup of that team might be, what some of the strengths are in terms of preferences, and also what perhaps some of the gaps are. So for example, one team might have lots of people who are very task orientated in there, which may mean that they are brilliant at getting stuff done, but they're not so good at asking how people are and bringing people into the vision around what's next and what they need from others. So yeah, it's a really interesting tool, which a lot of leaders and managers and individuals, professional individuals, have in their toolkit to learn a bit more about themselves and also about how they can get the best out of their teams as well.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting, and it seems like it's something that any corporation could benefit from. To know how people are going to work in your team. Are they heavy on people? Are they heavy on technical? Because you want to get that balance just right, I would assume, right?
Absolutely, that is the dream.
Okay.
100%.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit more about yourself today. So I just want to bring us back to the article. So it's titled "How to Thrive in a Remote Selling Environment." So I must say it's quite an apt article for, we've all been through a lot, especially through COVID-19 with the last, I want to say 18 months or so, or maybe off a month or two. So tell us a little bit more about why you chose to write this article, and why now?
Yeah. So, as I've mentioned, my career has predominantly been in sales, and a lot of that had been pre-pandemic face-to-face selling, out on the road, but also supporting people in my team who were out on the road every day selling. And we build a lot of sales methodologies, a lot of sales approaches and techniques, which are purely focused on face-to-face interactions, because that was the world that we were living in, and where we predominantly went to sell with customers. Obviously, the pandemic hit, and we were all, in our homes, and office buildings were left empty because everybody went, to work at home. And I think a lot of what we knew in terms of our approach, in my experience of selling, then was needing to be adapted and think about how it transitioned into this new world that we were now facing and some of those new challenges. And there's a lot of things that are still very much applicable in the way we approach selling face to face in this kind of virtual environment. But there are also a couple of things which are different and are new. And I think, I certainly hadn't had the opportunity to really think about how I needed to tweak my sales approach to be more effective in my selling conversations in that remote setting. And there was a few things that I learned along the way, and I just kind of thought, you know what, this might be helpful for people, because sales can sometimes be a bit scary and can feel a little bit like it needs to be demystified a bit and kind of broken down, and you think, I don't know how to sell. Actually, a lot of people do, because a lot of it is just about building relationships and trust. And when you're on a screen, that can be quite hard to do. So I just wanted to kind of, I suppose, consolidate all my hints and tips and try and help people still be effective in the way that they sell on a screen.
That's fantastic. But again, you mentioned some things are still applicable to how we used to sell face to face that can be transferred over to the virtual world. And you said there's other things that you've learned. Can you just share with us a few things that you found, a few of the major things that you've still found applicable, and some of the new things that you did learn that would benefit the virtual selling?
Yeah, sure. So I think some of the things that are still applicable in my experience are actually some of the basics, which we would do for any face-to-face meeting. So for example, things like having an agenda, having clear objectives around what you want to get out of that conversation and virtual meeting, taking notes and actions and following up on them. Those kind of basic principles that you would have for any meeting, actually, not necessarily a sales meeting, are still 100% applicable and really important in terms of setting our stall out of running a really effective meeting and successful meeting. And I think it's important to remember that even though we are online, that we are still predominantly influencing when we are online. We're not necessarily, that hasn't changed because we're not face to face. And so those basics in some way become even more critical than they did before in a face to face setting. So I think some of those still apply, and that creates the right environment to kind of start the sales conversation, and that helps build trust, create rapport, and they're such critical elements. And even little things like which I learned, which was around the tech. So making sure, like, for example, your microphone works, you know where the mute button is. I don't know how many of us have been in meetings like last year and the beginning of this year where it's like, you're on mute because you're chatting away and you've forgotten to unmute yourself. So just simple little things like that absolutely still apply around just testing the tech, making sure you're clear on what you're wanting to achieve and talk to that person about, and then taking actions and following up. So that would be kind of like the first thing. And then I think some of the things that I learned along the way were actually, do you know what? A lot of people I was talking to in terms of people who were potentially buying from me actually are working in the same environment that I'm in. So they're more open now to talking in this virtual setting than when they used to be in an office full time. And it's about adapting our approach to be considerate of their environment now as well. And it happens that our environment is the same in most instances now. We are predominantly online. And I think some of the things that changed for me was just thinking about how you build rapport and build trust. And I've touched upon it a little bit already, but when you're in a face-to-face environment, you tend to ask questions around, that person. So how are they today? What's important to them? What are they looking for? What solution are they trying to get to? And I found that you spend probably a bit more time in that questioning piece up front because you are face to face and it's about having a conversation. In a virtual environment, I found, to start with, that I was spending less time asking those questions because it didn't feel as natural. It didn't feel as comfortable. And so I was kind of rushing through actually that really critical stage in selling of building rapport, establishing trust, and just moving to the proposal, really. And actually that's where you understand a lot more about the other person, what's important to them, what they're looking for, what problems they have. And so I think the biggest change for me was actually being a lot more proactive and mindful and conscious about the questions I was asking up front in those online conversations, and probably asking more of them, because it's so easy to just skip that and move to what you're here to talk about, which is predominantly, you know, talking through a proposal of some description. And so that's probably one of the things I found, is actively thinking about the types of questions that I ask and how I can still build and foster that rapport and that trust with the other person over the screen.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, because that's quite insightful. You know, it seems like online appears to be a bit more fast paced than real life. So you kind of just get straight to the chase, don't you? But it's really good to strip it back and to say, actually, you know what, we're still human on the other side of it. So do what you would have done in person to, you know, to the best of what the situation allows, and build that rapport. So thank you so much for sharing. Just wanted to ask you just how you see the trend going, because you mentioned in your article as well that virtual selling is here to stay. It's not just a COVID-19 fad. And I just want, in your opinion, how do you see the trend progressing?
So I think there has been a seismic shift in the way that we now work and the environment that we now work in. I think pre-pandemic, you know, I was traveling to London every week. As an example, I was sitting in an office 200 miles away from my home, because, you know, the opportunity to work remotely was there, but it wasn't there as the most common approach to working. And I think now the pandemic, in a lot of instances, and not in every industry, but I think for a lot of organizations, has demonstrated that people can still deliver value for a business without necessarily sitting opposite somebody in an office. And I think that is a seismic shift, which elements of that will stay. It's more cost effective for businesses. It is more time saving as well. And so people have actually seen the financial benefit of, you know, not having people in the office full time. And that hits their bottom line, which at the minute, you know, it's tough out there, or has been a tough landscape out there for businesses. So any financial savings they make, you know, are really, really important now. And I think in a lot of instances, that has demonstrated how this change in environment can create a saving and actually still work out pretty well for everybody involved. And I think a lot of people now are looking for flexible working. I certainly am. I know I can do it. I wouldn't want to go back into an office 5 days a week. So do you know what? I don't think your buyers will want to go back into an office 5 days a week either. So being respectful and I suppose just kind of like thinking about, they are in the same situation as you, and so responding to that, and you know, that probably makes their opportunity to purchase a lot easier than what it did when they were sat in an office 5 days a week. And so they'll probably be really responsive to having you know, a virtual meeting. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we should be virtually meeting all the time. I think there is a balance of face-to-face and virtual as we move out of this kind of pandemic, fingers crossed. But I still think it has a role, the virtual selling and interaction. And it's just about finding the right balance for you and your business, really.
That's brilliant. And you touched on flexibility. So I just wanted to, you know, ask, because you mentioned again in the article that, you know, having flexibility of style will encourage customer engagement. So you mentioned about finding the balance, but, you know, some people may be really used to being here right now in the virtual space, and some people may be chomping at the bit to get back into the office. How would you go about finding the balance for someone who's either really pro one and against the other?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my point before, actually, what I was saying about the profiling stuff. You know, everybody is different. And it's important to remember when we're selling that people buy from people. And people's preferences with regards to where they want to work, how they want to be communicated to, you know, the way they respond to problems is going to be different. And I think just having an awareness of that up front and because something works for you, because you enjoy working from home, maybe full time, might not mean that your colleague or your line manager or somebody in your team is going to have that same preference. And I think when you create flexibility, it's just about being open to different views and perspectives and choices, really, and looking at what works for the business and the individual, but not being constrained by that, because that would be the worst possible thing. I think this pandemic has taught us anything, it's probably that, you know, there is, in the business context, amazing abilities to be flexible and to pivot what you're doing and to change the direction perhaps you thought you were heading in. And so that's how you kind of create that flexibility, is just taking inspiration, I think, from when you've done it before.
Thank you so much for that. And, you know, I hope this really helps someone who's, you know, finding it hard to balance, you know, to get their flexibility on. And just, you've mentioned this in your article as well. I just wanted to touch on it because we have people who are, you know, complete beginners, intermediate, or a complete pro at virtual selling. But, you know, how do you go about future proofing the way you sell virtually? How do you go about that approach?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think it is correct in the sense of, regardless of where you are in your sales journey or how comfortable you are with selling. So some of us are, you know, done it for a while, but some of us are beginners and might not necessarily have done it before. The first kind of tip I would say is just to think about how you reframe it in your own mind. It is essentially a conversation where you influence, and you don't have to prescribe it and label it a selling conversation, because a lot of people find that really difficult and that blocks them and they kind of shut down and panic. So it is just about influencing. And I think the other piece really as well is thinking about how you're selling now, in what world and what context that's in, and how you would like to be selling in the future in a virtual environment. And, you know, if you don't know what that looks like, that's fine. There's loads of resources online. The work of a sales coach such as myself, we can help with building a methodology for sales, and how you train and adapt that into your business. And really just thinking about where you want to get to, what the gap is, and the actions you can take to get there. And there's all sorts of things that, you know, can be put into place in terms of the steps of your sales approach, how you overcome objections comfortably, how you tailor your proposal for your customer. So yeah, lots of options that are available to make sure that you are future-proof and set up to be more effective selling in that virtual environment, which I think is here to stay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And just, you know, if you had to just leave us with one final thought on how to thrive in a remote selling environment, what would that be? Something that just, you know, just resonates, gets under our skin and stays with us for as long as possible.
So I would say, just going back to my point before about asking questions, the one thing I would say is be curious. Okay.
Just sweet, short and simple. Be curious. We can always remember that. We will. Thank you so much. It's just been a pleasure speaking to you today. And thank you so much for your contribution to this wonderful magazine. And I really hope that, you know, the audience out there take some of your advice and put them into practice and just keep going forward. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Suzy.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. I've loved chatting to you today.
Oh, thank you. You're really, really welcome. And if you guys out there would like to hear more from MO2VATE magazine, then please do visit motivatemagazine.com. That's Mo, M-O, the number 2, Vate, V-A-T-E, magazine.com. And you can become a subscribed member. And also, don't forget, if you do want that sense of community, you can visit and join our Facebook group. And that is MO2VATE magazine. This is the same, Mo, M-O, the number 2, Vate, V-A-T-E, magazine. And yep, just go on Facebook, type in MO2VATE magazine and request to join. It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you today, Suzy. And as usual, it's been a pleasure seeing you all. So thank you so much for your time.